My name's Dave DeBow, founder of MoneyPartnerFormula.com, and this show is built for everyday real estate investors who are actively doing deals and looking to scale using other people's money. So if you're an active real estate investor and you want to get featured on this show to talk about your own real estate and capital raising experiences, then just go to daveinterviewsyou.com. Now let's get rolling with this episode, and remember to subscribe for daily interview content.
Hey, gang, welcome back. Today, I'm very excited about our guest, Axel Ragnarsson, not because he's a fellow podcast host, although that's exciting, not because he's a very successful real estate entrepreneur, but that's exciting too, but because Axel is a marketer, especially when it comes to generating motivated leads in the multifamily space. So I think we're going to have a lot of fun chatting about that. Axel, welcome to the show. Great to have you.
Yeah, I appreciate the invite, Dave.
So Axel, give us a little snapshot as of springtime 2026. What does your portfolio currently look like? Where do you buy? What do you buy? Let's just get the big picture overview of real estate for you.
Yep. Yeah, the big bullet points. I live in Boston, Mass. We invest throughout southern New Hampshire. So for those that aren't familiar with the area, about an hour north of Boston.
Okay.
And we buy small to mid-sized multifamily real estate. As you mentioned, we source a lot of deals direct to seller. And, when I say small to mid-size, to define that, it's 5 to 75 unit deals. Most of what we do is in that 5 to 25, 5 to 30 unit range. Mm-hmm. And every once in a while, we'll buy a slightly bigger deal than that. Current portfolio size is about 550 units or so. I've been investing for about 10 years, and really we've started to scale over the last 3 or 4 years as we've started raising capital. And then we manage everything in-house. So we own our management company in southern New Hampshire, and we manage all of our buildings, and then we do some third-party management as well. So that business itself, including our units, manages about 900 or so units.
Nope.
All scattered sites, small, older buildings like what you find in New England. So that's kind of
so a lot of the stuff that the bigger management companies don't really want to deal with. Is that what I'm understanding?
Exactly. Yeah, the 8 units, the 12 units, the 20 units, all the stuff that doesn't justify on-site staff. But we've become really good at managing those types of buildings, and
because you own a whole bunch
that does them.
Yeah, you own a whole bunch. Yeah. That's really, really smart. So I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask you anyhow. Why did you decide to focus on these smaller properties?
So the easy and quick answer is because that's just the bulk of the housing stock in kind of the New England area. The greater Boston MSA and then up into southern New Hampshire is a whole lot of these 3, 6, 10 unit buildings that were built 100 years ago, right? Like so much of the housing stock is like 1900 to 1925. A lot of these kind of triple decker styles, like what you see in the movies. So when I got into real estate, that was what I started buying back in 2016, 17, just personally, the small 3 unit deals. And then over time, we just started doing slightly bigger deals, portfolios of a lot of these, smaller buildings, 20, 30, 40 unit portfolios from sellers that were retiring. Every once in a while, we'd find a bigger building, and then we just started doing a higher volume of them. And I would imagine that over time, we'll start to slowly increase kind of that bottom threshold of what we'll buy as the business grows. Mm-hmm. But predominantly, that's what's there to buy. And then the other piece of it too, though, is we are competing with more mom and pop, unsophisticated investors who are maybe investing with their own dollars. And we raise capital in fund structures where we'll raise, a few $1 million up front, go and buy a handful of these smaller deals, operate them much more efficiently, renovate them with some of our in-house crew, and get more out of them than, the person who's buying one every couple of years type of buyer.
Right. Yeah. That makes a ton of sense. Yeah. And you're kind of getting to a scale where you're bigger than the little guy and still under the radar for the big institutional type buyers.
100%. Yeah. And if we define the institutional buyer as, they're only looking at deals that are $10, $15 million plus, maybe even higher than that, $20 million plus. Mm-hmm. Well, they're going to just go down into Boston, right? They're going to go into the greater Boston area within 20, 30 minutes of Boston. And there's plenty of inventory down there to go buy. Whereas you head a little bit farther outside of that area, it's a whole lot of these $2.5, $3.5, $5 million deals where the juice isn't worth the squeeze. So
those guys.
as we continue to grow, we are competing with with kind of a much smaller type of investor, which we can outcompete, I will say.
So I'm not super familiar with the area myself, except for movies and whatnot, but I would imagine, well, like you said, a lot of these properties are 100 plus years old. These were big, nice old houses, single family homes originally that have been kind of hobbled together into triplexes, fourplexes, etc. I'm assuming there must be quite a bit of maintenance and renovation stuff that needs to be done for these kind of properties.
Yeah, it's definitely it's hard for, let's say, the investor who's like in the Midwest of the States or Southeast, Southwest, where it's funny because I know a lot of these investors and they're like, I won't buy anything that was built before 1970 or 1980. And I'm like, dude, that's new construction in my world. And, they're like, oh, the plumbing's old, the electrical's old. And it's like, it is, but it's all just a function of numbers, right?
Right.
So for us, it's, we'll get into these old buildings and, for example, we're closing in a couple of days on a 10-unit portfolio of a few smaller buildings. And, you go in the basement and you look up at the ceiling and the big full basements that we have here in New England. And you've got a kind of a mishmash of a couple of different plumbing types. You got some copper, you got some PVC, you got some PEX. And it's just, all right, so let's go back to the spreadsheet and assume that we got to replace the plumbing, right? And once every 20, 30 years, some guy who owns it at the time or gal is going to be the one to do all that work. Yeah. And then you're good for another stretch of time. Now, the good thing is that these buildings were built on just extensive, deep, dug, really nice field stone brick foundations oftentimes. And the buildings themselves are really solid. Yeah. And if you just maintain well and gut renovate and get behind the walls to replace a lot of the key infrastructure like the electric and the plumbing, then you're just going to be fine, right? It's an asset.
The bones are solid there. They're really
exactly. And the one thing that I think is interesting with these types of buildings that I think people forget is oftentimes they're not optimized like new construction or more recent last 20, 30 year construction of like, you've got your 2-bed, it's 750 square feet. And it's very cookie cutter. Like there's a lot of intrinsic character in the types of buildings that we buy, which might be higher ceilings or built-in cabinetry or large kind of bay windows with these big
original hardwood flooring and some really nice stuff.
Exactly. So there's a lot of stuff that is painful in terms of it being an older building, but there's a lot of aspects of these buildings that are actually more desirable, right? So I think that combined with the fact that it's much more accepted here, right? Most people live in older buildings, right? That's just kind of what it is. And that's what people are used to as well, on top of that.
Exactly. In fact, there's quite a bit of appeal to that in those markets. It's almost more appealing in a lot of cases. So Axel, let's get down to the marketing side of things because I love talking about that. So when it comes to direct to seller marketing, sounds like you generate a lot of your leads for seller leads from that. What does that look like? Tell us a little bit about what's working for you these days in 2026.
Yeah. So I'll kind of start high level with like the framework of how we think about it. And then we'll talk about the tactics of specifically what we're doing within our business. But high level, 3 ways you can get in touch with a seller, right? And when I say get in touch with a seller, the objective here is we want to speak with a seller who either is at that moment in time or at some point in the short-term future would be interested in selling their property or at least hearing an offer. And we want to do, the goal in getting in front of a seller is so that ideally, we're competing with less buyers to pursue that deal, where the inverse would be a broker marketing a property and competing with a bunch of buyers.
Right.
So in order to get in front of those sellers, we like to think we can hit their cell phone, we can hit their mailbox, like the physical mailbox, or we can hit their computer, right, their email. Mm-hmm. And a lot of folks kind of do one out of those 3 that do some level of direct to seller, and they probably don't do it that consistently. Do a little bit of cold calling, maybe a little cold emailing, send some direct mail here and there. If you're good at what you're doing doing maybe a couple of these consistently, couple of channels, as I like to call them. If you really want to stand out, you try to do all 3, and that's what we do in our business is we want to hit all 3 aspects of how, or touch on all 3 aspects of how we can get in touch with a seller. And we want to do so in a predictable way. So everything starts with a data list, all kinds of different resources that you can go to. We're a Reonomy subscriber, which is a a subscription platform that provides this data on a monthly basis, but you can, go buy a list off of ListSource. You can go beg your mortgage broker, your real estate broker who's got a CoStar subscription or something to go and pull a list. Let's get a good list, right? Unit count, geographic range, all that.
Hey there, if you're a capital raiser, a syndicator, or a fund manager, and you're looking for a steady flow of incoming accredited investor leads, then go ahead, grab a free copy of my new book, How to Get 20 Accredited Investor Meetings Every Month Without Cold Calling, Networking, or Chasing People. You can get that at 20accreditedinvestorsbook.com. Again, that's the number 20accreditedinvestorsbook.com.
So are you focusing primarily on the style of the building, or are you also looking at the age demographic of the owner?
So that's a good question. And I do know people who do have success with specifically targeting an owner in a particular age range, because when we look at who we buy from, the majority of the time, meaning, over 50% of the time, probably over 60%, retiring owner who doesn't really want to deal with it anymore, right? That's very oftentimes the prototype of the owner. And then you layer onto that, usually they are self-managing, or there's some screwed up management situation where their son-in-law is managing it, or whoever is managing it, and they're not doing a good job. And I could go find a management company or do it myself. I'd rather just sell it because I can make a good amount of money if I did sell it, because I bought it 10 plus years ago. So for us, we don't typically filter on that, mainly because the data is less consistent. So what we want to do is we want to get good data, right? And usually that comes in, or the way that we do that is to filter just based on some very simple, easy things to filter on, which it's hard for these data providers to screw up. One of them being unit count range, like just physically what type of properties that we're pursuing. For us, that's 5 to 75 units. Like we have a very wide marketing range. We have the geographic areas that we want to market in, the counties, the cities, et cetera. And then the way that we somewhat filter for likely motivation at the seller level is length of ownership. So we filter out anything that's sold within the last 3 to 5 years, depending on this particular list we're pulling. And if you really want to increase the likelihood that the seller is going to be someone who's willing to entertain an offer that works for you, you just, more long-term owners on that list, right? No sale lasts 7 years, no sale lasts 10 years, right? They're going to have equity. They're probably going to have already renovated it, and they've already spent their money. They're not going to be in the middle of a business plan like a guy who bought the building 2 years ago. Yeah. So that's kind of the filter you pull. So for us, I think the kind of nice middle ground is you got your unit count, you got your geographic range, no sale lasts 5 years, right? That's typically going to be, those are sellers that are worthwhile building a relationship with.
Got it.
And then once you've got that list, then you just start to determine what your plan of attack is, right? I think doing, all three, cold calling, cold emailing, sending direct mail, can be intimidating. So I think you pick one, you start at a level of which you can stay consistent, right? Let's say you're doing direct mail. Try to just aim to send direct mail out quarterly, right? Get some phone calls.
So what have you found is kind of, sorry to interrupt, but I'm just curious, like list size that makes sense for doing this? Like at least 1,000, 2,000, 10,000, what does that look like for you on a quarterly basis?
The quick answer is, I think it depends on your budget and your time availability. If you're somebody who's working full time and you're working 10 hours a day and you can't really, pick up the phone that much, like don't make it harder on yourself to be consistent, right? You want to solve for what you can do consistently. So I think a good list size is like 500 to 1,000.
Yeah.
When you're getting started, because if you send 1,000 mailers, you're probably getting in around 10 to 15 phone calls. That's very broad and different in a high, a very competitive market, less competitive market. But like you can handle that if you've got a job, if you've got a family, whatever.
Right.
You want to send out 2,000, below a bunch of money on direct mail, and then you're not able to pick up the phone when people call you. Right. So I think you should start with 500 to 1,000, and you should prioritize getting the absolute most out of the leads that you're generating versus trying to get a lot of leads. Right. You're better off having less conversations of higher quality. And what I would say is, you send let's say you're starting this, January 1st, right? Let's just for round numbers, right?
Yep.
You send your mail on January 1st, gets in the mailboxes the 5th, 6th, 7th of the month. Then on the 10th, 11th, 12th of the month, if you want to layer in another type of prospecting, you can go and get all the emails from your data list and send them an email that references that piece of mail you sent. Hey, I sent you a piece of mail. Don't know if you got it. Would love to chat with you. My name is X. We buy property in Y, and here's why you're not going to waste your time by talking to me, right? We've done a handful of deals last year where, credible buyers, I'm local, et cetera. Get them to feel comfortable with calling you. And just do so at a level that you can keep your arms around. And as you continue to develop a comfort with this, then you start layering in these new channels. But the big thing is, and I think this is just kind of the fundamental high-level takeaway, and it's a very subtle mindset shift, but it's an important one, is you don't want to do this with the objective of like doing a deal. You want to do it as with the objective of networking with sellers, right? So it's love to just chat about the property and learn more about what your plans are. And if you don't want to sell, that's totally fine. Would love to meet another investor in the marketplace. Maybe there's some way in which we can help each other. Yeah. It lowers the pressure, right? It's like, cool. I'll share some numbers when I feel comfortable. Maybe I'm not interested in selling today, but you're right. We're doing the same thing. We might as well chat. Yeah. And eventually you'd be surprised at a lot of the folks that you read, that you interact with when you do this. And the quick aside is, we found LPs in our business who we were trying to buy their property. They weren't, I'm going to hold forever. And we're like, that's cool, man. Let's stay in touch. And then they end up becoming familiar with what we do, and they end up investing as an LP. And, so
that's all right too.
Yeah. There's all these different ways of which you can develop these relationships, but this is just a way to do it in a more predictable fashion. And then you start to develop these over a long period of time with patience, and that's how you start to see results, long story short.
So at this point, Axel, now that you've been doing this for a while and this is your full-time gig, what does your machine look like 2026? How are you doing that on a quarterly basis, kind of pulling new lists and going once every 3 months, or are you doing monthly? What does your system look like?
So we pull a new list at the beginning of each year. Mid 2020, January of like the new year. So mid January of 2026 this year, we pull our whole new list. And, that's just to make sure that we keep the data fresh. We send our direct mail quarterly, like clockwork, right? First week of each new quarter, we got the mail out. And it's relatively the same template, but we alter it slightly, right? There's just some slight little tweaks to the copy each quarter. That's like 1 month might be, we're really stressing that we're not going to overly bug their tenants during the transaction process, right? To make them feel a little bit more comfortable with the fact that, we're not going to be barging through there 3 times or trying to get the deal done and annoying everybody, so that's might be a value prop we're selling in one. The next one, we're really selling that, no broker commissions, and this is our closing timeline, et cetera, right? We have all these different things that are benefit.
Different angles,
slightly different copy, 85% the same, little 15% different. Yeah. Once a year, and this is where we get into, some of the special sauce, is we send a mail piece that's much more intensive to put together, I'll say, right? This is one, instead of being like a one-sided, just copy with the other side blank, we do a double-sided where the other side has pictures of all of these properties that we bought in the last year to further establish credibility. We have a couple of testimonials from sellers at the bottom who we've worked with in the past. And we list the actual property that we literally bought from them so that we really tie it out. Yeah. We fold that up and we put it in a slightly bigger manila envelope and we send that out, right? And that costs a few bucks a piece to send, but that's going to get opened 100% of the time. Like somebody gets that and they think it's an important document and they're going to open it. And, that's our way of staying fresh and sticking out. And every quarter as well, we are reaching out to the folks that we have on this list after we send the mail, via email. Hey, we sent you that mail piece. I know I've been bugging you forever. How long? You can tell me to buzz off, but I'd love to chat with you. Then after that, we cold call them as well. And the second somebody raises their hand and says, all right, what will you offer me? Or what are you guys up to? We take them off the prospecting list of sending, emails and cold calling, and we move them into our CRM. Take the notes, and that's when we take a much more specific approach with that seller, and we start building on that conversation.
Yeah, it's now a warm lead. Yeah,
exactly, and it's a pretty systematized process. Our list at this point is about 2,200 properties, right? We have a wider geographic range that we're marketing to.
Yeah, that's still very manageable.
It's still very manageable.
Exactly. Yeah, if you're doing that once a quarter. Okay, so you got the direct mail piece. Usually, it's a normal letter in an envelope. Once a year, it's the big manila one. Then in between that, you're sending out a follow-up email. What does the cold call look like for you guys, Axel, and who does it?
Yeah, so I have an acquisitions manager now. I mean, it used to be me, but 3 years ago, brought on somebody like, full time who handles the cold calling and handles basically everything up to when we determine how we make an offer. Right, that's when I step back into the process, and then I get involved in the bigger stuff where like I really want to, really get comfortable with how we're handling it. But from a cold calling standpoint, it's very, very straightforward. It's, my acquisitions manager, his name is Justin. Hey, Rick, this is Justin. I'm with Aligned Real Estate Partners. You probably recognize the company name because we've been stuffing your mailbox with mail and your inbox with emails. We'd love to talk about 123 Main Street if you have a second. Mm-hmm. And a handful of those are no thanks, click. And another handful are like, all right, let's talk about it. And the goal of that first...
And a lot of them are voicemails.
A lot of them are voicemails of which you're getting a call back. A lot of them are voicemails of which somebody reads it and then they text you and then they say, hey, make me an offer, right? So many people do business over text now that the goal is to just get your cell phone number on somebody's phone so that they can text you. And then we go back and forth over text. He's got a company phone where he's going back and forth over iMessage and, he's got the blue text and everybody's comfortable that this isn't like some,
Filipino
online
VA
platform sending it through Google Voice or whatever, right? Like that's a big thing that we prioritize. So we're not like the single family wholesaler guys who are auto dialing with the.
So yeah, you're manually dialing and you're
exactly.
That's smart. And again, that's doable with 2200. So do you have your guy like, is it an SOP where he's got to make 50 calls a day or something like that to keep it consistent, or how do you do that?
Yeah, so we only really make those cold calls quarterly, right? So we do it after we send the mail, and then the rest of his time is pretty occupied, like pursuing, following up with the seller that he chatted 7 months ago. Yeah, where he's like, "Hey, I'm kind of interested. Maybe talk to me later this year. That's when I'm going to start thinking about selling." And then he's doing much more of that manual follow up. But if you're making, typically he's making 30 calls a day because we don't want to jeopardize the phone numbers. Like that's the little, we don't want to get those phone numbers marked as spam or anything like that. So yeah, he's making in a given week 100, 500 calls, which a month is 400, 500 calls.
500, yeah.
Over 3 months, that's 1,500 calls, and roughly that's how long it's taken him to work through that whole list, right? On a very high level standpoint. And there are a lot of those calls where he's going to get a bad phone number or something like that. It's much easier to get the best mailing address for a property owner than it is to get a good cell phone or a good email. So we've got better data for the direct mail in terms of like where to send the mail than we do the other stuff. So on a list of 2,250, he's probably got 1,700 good phone numbers, right? He's got even less good emails. But a lot of that, we collect that data over time.
So you mentioned something interesting at the top there, Axel. You said that at the beginning of each year, you did I understand you basically pull the same list and just double check to make sure the data is still accurate? Did I understand that? Or a whole new list?
We pull a whole new list, and then so we use a platform called Resimpli, Resimpli, which is just a real estate focused CRM and direct to seller marketing platform, which we're huge fans of. But they have a whole feature in there where you upload a new list, they cross-reference with your last list, mark all of the out-of-date records, scrub it for you, and now you've got your new list that you continue working off of. So that's part of that platform. And you can do that manually too with like AI. Here's my old list, here's the new list. Make me the right list for today, and it'll go and do all that for you. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. Axel, we could talk about this for hours. Congratulations, smart. I love what you're doing, and it's tight and it's manageable, and you're automating some stuff, but you're still doing old school manual work, which is really smart and little by little bite-sized chunks. Yeah, I can see why this is working. What, just before we wrap up, what percentage of your deals come from this versus broker provided deals?
Yeah. So over the last 3 years, we've done over 75% of our deals direct to seller. We do about the last few years we've done about, depending on the year, between 150 and 260 units a year in terms of what we've acquired. The bigger years are usually driven by like one big deal. Last year we did a 72 unit deal from a direct mail piece. And that, bumped those numbers up pretty significantly, but we do a lot of them, and it's a big focus of ours. So we still do a handful of deals with a broker involved, but like they're very rarely the best and final offer type situations. It's like we, talk to a broker where a property recently fell under contract and we kind of catch them at the right time. Or we've been direct to seller on a deal with a guy for 2 years. We got really close. He says, I just hired a broker, a family friend, because it makes me feel comfortable. And then we just talk to the broker and put it together, and he earns a commission for basically doing nothing type of thing. Yeah. But the vast majority do come direct to seller.
Awesome. Axel, this is great. I'm sure there's going to be some folks wanting to connect with you. What's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah. So website, our business is Aligned Real Estate Partners. Our website is aligned, ALIGNED, REP.com. And if you just want to shoot me an email, it's Axel, AXEL at alignedrep.com.
Well, this has been great. Always love talking marketing. Congratulations on your success, Axel, and keep up the good work.
Love it. Thank you for having me.
All right, everybody, take care. We'll see you on the next one.
Hey there, I really hope you enjoyed that episode. And as always, if you want to listen to more daily interview content, make sure you subscribe. And if you're an active real estate investor and you're doing deals and you'd like to get featured on this show, then just head over to daveinterviewsyou.com.